Hello, book lovers, and welcome to episode 149 of Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Joe Moldover, and I am delighted to be here with you this evening at an unusual time for us, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Every week, I and my partner, Kimberly Hensel-Lorant, crisscross the country, visiting wonderful authors and the independent bookstores they love. We have been to all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico, DC, Canada, and the UK. And tonight we are returning to my home state of New Jersey, and we are with the wonderful author Liz Alterman. Liz, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, Joe, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Also joining us, Abigail Good from the Book House in Milburn, New Jersey. Abigail, welcome to the program.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Liz Alterman is the author of The Perfect Neighborhood, He'll Be Waiting, Sad Sack, and numerous pieces of short fiction and nonfiction. And she is joining us from New Jersey as well, where she lives with her family. Liz, I'm going to go to you first. You chose the Book House as the independent bookstore that you'd like to appear alongside. Why? What can you tell us about the Book House?
Well, I've been a longtime fan of the Book House. It recently changed hands, and the way I discovered it, even though I just live a few towns away, it's in this adorable downtown Milburn, lots of great restaurants and shops, and just a really nice vibe. I could actually take the train there, which I love, and be there in about 10 minutes. But I've been taking writing classes at the Writers Circle for a long time. And I guess one time they had a holiday party. It was a virtual holiday party. And the former owner came on and she made book recommendations for every person in your life: your mom, your dad, your child's teacher, your babysitter, the thriller lover, the nonfiction reader. And I just fell in love with her. And I actually ended up ordering 2 books that she recommended, one for my dad and one for my son. And they were huge hits. And after that, I was like a complete Book House devotee. And then when I became an author, they were incredibly supportive. I reached out to Melody, the new owner, and she welcomed me. She hosted an event for me. And I recently had another event with an author who lives pretty close to Milburn. And the 2 of us appeared together and had sort of an in conversation. Her name is Lee Kelly, and Abigail was there and was just incredibly helpful in, supplying books and making sure our audience was comfortable and able to see and hear. And there's wonderful coffee there, and you can bring snacks and wine. So it's got everything. And when my kids were little, I would pick up puzzles there too. So it's kind of the best of all worlds.
Love it. That is fantastic. Katie, hello. Thank you for joining us. We envy you being in Italy. It's fantastic. So many questions, Liz and Abigail, for you. And I guess I want to be guided a little bit here by Liz's career, because oh no, is that a bad idea? So for those of you who don't know Liz's work, Liz has had an unusually wide range in terms of the types of writing that she's done. She's published most recently her mystery, The Perfect Neighborhood, in 2022. Also memoir, also YA, also a good deal of nonfiction, including just straight up journalistic report, like energy reporting, as well as great humor pieces.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
Including in McSweeney's, which is one of my bucket list journals. I've been rejected by McSweeney's many times, and
so have I. Yes, I kept trying, and I have to, if I can just take a moment here. The day that I finally got my first acceptance, I was just flopped out on my couch. I had a sinus infection, and I was taking some kind of medication that put me into like a slight trance. So I had to read the email a number of times, and I was kind of like, wait, this is the moment I've been waiting for years, and I can't even appreciate it because I'm in this, sinus medication coma. But it was really, but that was a bucket list for a long time for me. But you will get there, Joe, and when you do,
I will eventually get there. Well, was that Writer's Tweets Translated? Was that the one that you got there first?
I think it was 16 Ways to Injure Yourself when you're over 40. And it was inspired by real life events. I was talking to my husband's aunt, and I kept my arm like this for about 40 minutes. And then when I went to put my arm down, I couldn't move my neck. And so I started working on a list. And my husband is kind of like tough to make laugh. So I read a few aloud to him. And when he laughed, I felt like, okay, maybe I'm on the right track here. So.
Oh, nice. I love that you did a sequel for 50.
Thank you. Yes, I know. And scary. I'm probably going to do one for 60.
Oh, God. I thought Writer's Tweets Translated was like laugh out loud funny.
Oh, Joe, thank you.
So we're gonna drop for the audience. We're gonna drop these in the chat anyway because it's like,
of course, also based on real life events. I'm sure.
Oh my God, it was so true. I was like, get out of my brain, Liz Alterman.
Thank you.
It was. So here's the thing. I want to ask you, Liz, about humor, and then Abigail, I'm going to ask you about marketing humor, selling humor, books, and things like that. But Liz, I to the limited degree that I'm ever funny, it's really kind of like in interaction with other people, like riffing with other people and bouncing off of other people. And I have a really hard time with this idea of just like sitting down at a computer and just like being funny, like the SNL writer who sits down on a Monday and just writes a sketch because Lauren said he has to, like, I don't get that. So I guess my question is like, what's your humor process? Like, can you just sit down and be funny? Or are these like riffs you've had with friends? Then you're like, oh, I've got to write that down on the back of an envelope. Or like, how does it happen?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a little bit of both, but I have to say you and I are probably the opposite because it's the riffing in real life that I can't do it. I think I'm better on paper. And I have a friend too, he's hysterically funny. He lives in California and he'll always say, I'm much better in email. I'm much better in print than I am live. So, but I do think it's almost like I get a spark and I mean, there are times where I've spent an entire day just working on a list. And I think growing up, I grew up watching a ton of David Letterman and the whole idea of becoming his top 10 list writer was like a life goal. Of course, I didn't achieve it, but I love a good humor list. But I think for me, it's almost like, and my poor family, when I create a list, I'll be like, what about this? What about, and they're very honest, brutally honest. I would say, they'll say like, go back. And I don't think you're not there yet. You're onto something, but not quite. So I think for me, I do a little bit better in writing than I do. And that's one thing. I love stand-up comedy. But when somebody shouts out something to it, and the Book House actually does stand-up comedy. That's another thing I wanted to say that I love about them. They do that once a month on Saturday evenings. And so I love stand-up, but I feel almost like anxiety by proxy when somebody shouts something out and the comedian's going to have to riff with them like that. I would almost be like, I can't do that with you.
Right. Ooh, and that brings up another question I'm going to come to you with. But first, Abigail, so I want to ask you. So, I mean, I guess I remember when I was like much younger, like in high school, I felt like there were lots of just fantastic comedy books, and they were like humor sections in bookstores. Like Dave Barry was publishing a book every year. I love Dave Barry so much. I'd get up, every Sunday morning and read his column in the paper. And I'm sort of dating myself, but like,
I am too. And Joel Stein, do you remember Joel Stein in Time? And he's got a great Substack now. So I love him.
Such wonderful humor writers and books and all this stuff. And I mean, I don't really know. I mean, Leah loves the top 10 list of Letterman as well. Abigail, I mean, what's the state of humor books? Like, do you have a humor section still? Do people buy, or are people getting their humor off of like TikTok now? And are humor books just not a thing?
We have a humor section, but it's pretty small. I'm probably not selling a ton from it. I feel like when I'm reading, I just want to read whatever I'm going to read and then have it be funny. I don't want to go to a humor book specifically. I just want it to be part of like the fantasy or sci-fi or just regular fiction that I'm reading.
It's like
I feel like that's what most people are looking for.
I think that makes sense. What's the deal with the stand-up? So, I mean, you guys decided that you were going to do a once-a-month stand-up night?
Yeah. Our comedy nights are very popular. They get sold out. I haven't worked one yet. It's my first trial by fire. I've heard the store gets very busy. It's going to be at the end of October, our kind of Halloweenish stand-up night. So I'm excited for that because it gets a lot of people into the store. Everyone has a good time laughing. And then you pick up a book while you're here for comedy night. So it's a good time.
Absolutely. Katie in Italy is with us, that she thinks she loves humor books as well. Yeah. One thing that I find, Liz, that one of the comments you made about presenting your lists to your family made me think of is that I find I'm usually pretty good at getting editorial feedback. If I write something that I think is like a good romance moment or a scary moment or suspenseful, and then people are like, no, I'm like, okay, it's whatever. Like, this is part of the process. But if I write something that I really think is funny and people don't think it's funny, I'm like sort of mortally wounded.
I know. It hits differently. You're right.
Right? Like, I feel like flopping with humor is like somehow just so much more painful. Like, do you get that?
Absolutely. I feel like if someone rejects an essay that I've written, or if I have to rework a journalistic piece that I've written about, let's say I'll do some historical pieces for local newspapers. If that comes back with edits, I'm fine with that. I don't mind. But when those rejections roll in from shouts and murmurs, right, and from my friend Chris at McSweeney's, that definitely, it cuts you, and you're like, oh, I'm not funny at all.
Right. Right.
I shouldn't go outside. I shouldn't,
Like, I'm a failure. I feel so like embarrassed. I feel
right. It's really, like you've put yourself out there, and
that's right. That's
right.
It
hits differently. You're right.
It hits differently. I feel like, if I write like a love scene, I'm putting myself out there, and if people are like, nah, it doesn't, I'm like, all right, well, whatever. But there's something about humor where it's very vulnerable.
Definitely.
So it's interesting. So another part of your trajectory, apart from the humor, which I love, has been about going from sort of young adult to adult writing. So a couple questions about that. Abigail, I'm going to start with you. So I want to ask you about YA. I mean, YA as sort of it's not really like a genre, but it's sort of an area of literature, has kind of had an interesting arc. I think it's gone from something that was kind of not a thing at all to something that was here to be for kids, to then having a lot of crossover to the adult world. I sort of want to ask you, so, and keep in mind, you're talking to somebody who's just putting final edits on his second YA novel. So be gentle with my feelings. But what's going on with the YA market right now? I mean, do you feel like this is, that a lot of adults are sort of looking into YA for what they want to read? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, in online book communities, I've always been very into YA books. So to me, like, I'm so present in them that it still feels like, YA books are on top of the world. And it's sometimes wild to me that they're not necessarily on top of the bestseller lists. But, in store, I definitely feel like as many adults are buying YA as teens. So, I think that's interesting. I feel like at least in our area, it's pretty much 50-50. Yeah. We do get a lot of teens in the store, but they're mostly here for the coffee. So I'm still trying to get them interested in the books.
Yeah. That makes sense. Liz, how did you wind up in YA? So He'll Be Waiting with YA. Did you set out to be a YA writer, or did you write the book and then the publisher was like, we find this to be YA?
That's a great question. What happened was I'm the mom of 3 boys who unfortunately are reluctant readers. And I can say that because I'm sure even though I've sent them the link, they are probably not watching right now. What can you do? But anyway, I had a hard time. Like, if they find a book that they love, they will sit and read it. But it's me handing them one book after another saying, try this, try that. And, of course, they love the Rick Riordans. And then they'd say to me, when is Rick Riordan coming out with a new book? As if like I have a hotline to Rick Riordan, or, Dan Gutman, or Jeff Kinney from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But so they were a tough audience. And so I had written my memoir, and after spending 2 years kind of in nonfiction, I thought, what a lovely escape it would be to go into a different world. And I'm a big thriller reader, so I wanted to read that. And then also I was reading sometimes YA books with them, trying to say like, okay, you read a page, I'll read a page, and we'll go back and forth. Or like, you read a chapter, I'll read a chapter, kind of like our own book club. So I had this idea for this story, and I thought, okay, I'm going to read it and then I'll give them a chapter. And it was kind of a way to get them to read. But then also I wanted their feedback, because especially my oldest son would say like, oh, teens don't talk like that, or your texts are way too long. Nobody's texting a paragraph. Like, you're not in touch with how people, you text like an old lady. So I said, okay, I'm taking all of this in. And of course I wanted to be authentic. So, and my middle son, when I'd give him a chapter, he'd finish it and then he'd say, okay, what happens next? And so that was kind of encouraging for me to keep writing, almost, to satisfy his curiosity. So that was neat for me to go about it. But, it was hard. I guess I had an agent at the time and she was trying to sell it, and we'd get close and then people would say, we have something like this on our list. I know Karen McManus's books were very popular, like right around that time. And we would hear like, okay, we kind of have something similar, but so it was definitely tough. Or my agent then would send it to places that I guess were mainly for adult markets. And then they would come back and say, if Liz writes something for adults, let us know. So I was kind of, I've got like 90,000 words here. What about this? But so it was challenging, but congratulations to you for finishing your edits. That's such an accomplishment
thank you.
To get to that point.
Thank you. It is a huge relief. And parenthetically, I was writing my acknowledgments this weekend, and at the same time listening to you on the Acknowledgements podcast, which was fantastic, which was
I don't know if you know, but the host is also from New Jersey. She's right in Cranford. Yes.
Oh, no kidding. Abigail, I don't know if you know about this. This is a podcast called, I think it's just called Acknowledgements. And we'll put a link to it in the chat if Kimberly can find it. It's basically, it starts with the acknowledgement section of a book and asking the author about the people. Who's this person who, like, you said, thanks for, that time in Vegas. Like, what happened in Vegas? Whatever, it's like.
That's the secret backstory, kind of. Like,
I know, it's so cool. I loved it.
Yeah.
So that's great. So you published He'll Be Waiting, and then you have now, congratulations, we've worked our way around who you did cross over and publish The Perfect Neighborhood. So actually, would you, I know we're sort of 20 minutes in at this point, I would have done this earlier, but can you give us your elevator pitch for The Perfect Neighborhood? For people who don't know about it, what's this book about?
Oh, okay, sure. It starts off, I guess, it's been kind of compared to like a Big Little Lies, or for fans of Sally Hepworth, Lucy Foley. So it starts off, you kind of hear these gossipy voices of women in this neighborhood. And they're talking about one of the residents, Allison Langley, is a model and an actress. And she has left her husband, who's a former rock star. And this becomes the talk of the town for about 2 months. And everyone thinks if this couple can't make it, none of us stands a chance. And then, so fast forward 2 months, a little boy, Billy Barnes, goes missing on his walk home from kindergarten. And it's kind of like that record scratch moment of everybody kind of like, wait a second, we're in this upscale community, this affluent neighborhood, nothing bad is supposed to happen to us here. And then they start to almost blame themselves and kind of turn on one another, thinking, we were so focused on this golden couple's marriage kind of falling apart that we took our eye off kind of our own backyards. And so the book is told from multiple points of view, and you kind of get everyone's perspective, and sort of everyone weighs in on everybody else. And really, what I was thinking about while writing it is just, the whole notion of you never really know what's going on behind closed doors, or sort of the guilt that moms often feel. The boy who goes missing, she's recently gone back to work. And I think in certain towns, it's almost a status thing for a mom to be there. And like, well, I volunteered for this and I volunteered for that. And what do you mean you're working? She's not as good a mom as this. So kind of like that infighting that you see, unfortunately, in small towns, of almost like that competitive spirit of, and that in crowd, there's a mom who just wants to fit in and learn about, who's the gentle dentist, and who, how do I get my child on the basketball team for, height challenged youth. Like there's a kind of a commentary on all of the things you see in small towns, but while wondering where this boy is. And then I should also mention, and I'm sorry, this is going much longer than an elevator pitch.
No, it's great.
giant escalator pitch. This, I guess the babysitter who was due to be there that afternoon, she has a secret of her own and she's late. And so we sort of touch on what's going on in her world, and I guess all of the perspectives sort of come together to give the reader a picture of this community.
So that's fantastic. To the audience, as you know, we are a voluntary collective. We are here to support independent booksellers. And so if you are able, use the links in the chat and pick up a copy of Perfect Neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yeah, and do not do it from big online retailers that begin with the letter A. Do it to support independent booksellers. Do it to support the Book House. We're putting the link to do it through Bookshop to support the Book House in Milburn, New Jersey. You can also read chapter 1 of A Perfect Neighborhood on Liz's website, and we're putting the link in there for that too.
Oh, thank you.
So, Liz, one question that I had for you. Oh, and by the way, if you're in the audience and you're one of Liz's kids, I strongly recommend you drop a comment in the chat just to prove your presence.
That would be nice, right? Surprise me, boys, right?
the holidays are coming, guys.
That's right.
So, Liz, but that sort of brings me to a question. So, I mean, you're mom of 3 kids. You're writing about a situation where kids are in danger, kids are going missing, things like that. I mean, I always find that to be, as a reader, I always find that to be such a powerful tool in a book. I feel like once you put a child in danger, like that's it. Like that's what the book's about. You know, like, I mean, it's like there's not just like a little bit of that in the book. That is like the centerpiece of the book. As a writer, did you find it difficult to write about sort of like every parent's worst nightmare, as a parent yourself?
A little bit. And it's funny because my kids will say, why did you write about this? And, my oldest will joke almost like, are you hoping one of us will go missing? And I said, no, I think as a parent, it's your greatest fear. And I mean, I know there are moments where I have been in a grocery store and they're right beside me and then you turn and they're gone. And there's even a part in The Perfect Neighborhood that's based on real life where this mom loses her son who he's gone for just a second to go look at lobsters in a tank in the seafood section. And my son was always going to check out the lobsters. So luckily I had nowhere to find him, but it's like that heart stopping fear. And I guess I wrote it during the pandemic, and it was kind of, I joked that it was a good project for me to have because I guess while other people were doing their sourdough and learning to knit, I was just running away to hide out in this town and try to, I don't want to spoil anything, but try to plot out what happens to this boy and the families in the community. So, but I think, yes, I think for me as a mom, that is definitely my greatest fear. Like I would say, you could read a book with like alien invasions or stuff like that, and that does not scare me nearly as much as somebody saying like your kid is 10 minutes late getting home and no one knows where he is. Like that's my greatest fear.
I mean, right. All right. That's just right. I mean, it's just incredible. You bring up sourdough. So we've spoken to many, well over 100 booksellers over 3.5 years. And one of the things we've tried to track is sort of like what are people interested in right now? And I feel like there was a sourdough moment in bookselling where people wanted either the books that they had always meant to read. So people were buying like Melville or like sort of like comfort books and things like that. Abigail, what are people in Milburn, New Jersey picking up right now? What's hot?
Emily Wilson's Iliad has been pretty popular since we got that in.
All right.
So I'm excited because I suggested that one. So that's always, you feel very smug when the book you suggested is selling a lot.
That's right. Like vindicated.
Yeah. Very vindicated. The new Percy Jackson book, of course. We just had a kid come in today to pick that up. So everyone's very excited about that. We're waiting the new Diary of a Wimpy Kid because we know that's going to sell a ton. And Lessons in Chemistry still pretty much flying off the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel, Abigail, like you mentioned, trying, getting teenagers in to get coffee, then trying to sell them a book. You mentioned sort of the stand-up comedy night. Do you feel like independent bookstores are doing more sort of non-book stuff than they used to, just to try to bring people in the doors as a community space. And then sort of like, by the way, don't leave without a book. Do you think that that's kind of a trend?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was noticing it in the stores that I frequented, even before I was working at the book house. It's, it's not quite what things used to be, but I don't know that it's a bad thing either. Like the fact that, stores will sell more non-book items now. I don't mind that we sell a lot of puzzles because I also love puzzles. And I specifically love the puzzles that are based on books, like the World of Jane Austen puzzle, the World of Shakespeare puzzle. I love to do those and put on an audiobook and just read with my ears while I'm doing a puzzle. So I think that is, a nice thing for bookstores to do.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you on the puzzles. I feel like there is sometimes I can find it a little bit jarring, like in my favorite independent bookstore where there's like kitchenware. And I'm like, wait, like why? Where am I? But I feel like the puzzles do fit. I think that those do work.
The puzzles, they just go.
They go. Liz, question from Kim over on Facebook, and I think this is sort of a throwback to the conversation we were having a moment ago about writing about your child going missing, writing this kind of nightmare scenario as a parent. So do you feel like you're kind of like working through your nightmares when you write something like that? I mean, is there almost like a therapeutic quality to this where you're sort of like looking at this terrible fear head on and kind of like working through it?
I think so. And I guess that's probably a theme, I guess, in all of my writing, because my memoir deals with the time my husband and I lost our jobs within 6 weeks of each other. And so that was kind of like writing through a nightmare and trying to use humor as a, almost, I don't want to say a coping mechanism, so to speak. So I think also on some level, you're kind of like, if I put this out in the universe, it can't ever happen to me, and I'm lucky. It's kind of funny. I joke, but my mom, who's, super sweet and is like that protective grandmother. So my boys are older. They're all 6 feet tall or taller and will still be somewhere. And if we're in a crowd and somebody blocks one, she's like, "Where's Sam?" And I'm saying to her, "Mom, he's 6'2". It's going to take a lot for somebody to scoop him up and run off with him.
Right.
But I think like I guess that was my greatest fear. And then also I should touch on, there's another part of the story that deals with one character who has recurrent miscarriages. And I wanted to kind of touch on how that impacts the way she feels in the community. And when she sees these other moms, maybe she hasn't seen them over the winter, and then it's spring and she sees, new babies in strollers and moms expecting a child. Like, I guess I hadn't really seen that too often covered in books. And I kind of wanted to address just how a character feels in that situation. So it's kind of child loss on a couple of levels. The boy who's missing, and then this mom going through this kind of recurrent miscarriage situation. So I definitely think for me, it's kind of on a couple of levels, writing through, fear of a child going missing and almost, okay, if I put it out there, this will never happen to my family, sort of almost like when you cross your fingers behind your back. That
Right. Yeah, no, I get that. And I think there's also times when we sort of become kind of preoccupied with something and, almost sort of obsessed or just sort of stuck on something where writing it down and developing it into a narrative almost helps to kind of like get it out of our heads.
Exactly. And I think too, one part I wanted to also include in the book is when the boy goes missing, the police ask the mom, what was he wearing? And, how many times do your family members leave the house, and can you identify what they're wearing? Or, yeah, I know. And it's just small stuff like that when I was researching it, I thought like, oh man, or at one point, the mom has been putting things on social media, like there's my big boy walking to kindergarten alone, and her location is displayed. And so the police kind of say like, if your profile is public, anybody could see this. And so I just think it was things that maybe you don't think about that are worth kind of giving a second look at and just I don't know, maybe good reminders for myself to.
Well, and you're exploring guilt. You're exploring the sense of sort of like parental culpability.
Right.
Which is so hard to get away from.
Yes.
It just sort of comes with the job. Katie's wondering, what authors you admire and why? So, I mean, are you a big thriller reader? Are you somebody who, has particular thriller authors who you're hoping to kind of channel, or who are your influences?
Oh, that's a great question. I kind of read all across the board. I know it was a book that sent me to the book house looking for a copy for my cousin. I recently loved Maggie Smith's memoir. I love anyone who can kind of really pull you into a rich world. Hers, You Can Make This Place Beautiful. I absolutely loved that. She's an author I admire. I receive her newsletters, and I feel like she's got just such a generous spirit when it comes to sharing her process. And then another book I read recently that I really loved was called My Murder by Katie Williams. And that there's like a murder, sort of a thrillery. There was one part where I was alone in my house listening to it, and I gasped. I was like, oh, I never suspected this person. And so I think when something can kind of catch you up short or make you anxious, I did just read one that I really liked that I was reading it far too late into the night. It was called Just Stay Away. And it's about a family. They move into a neighborhood, and there's kind of this like very scary neighbor boy. And even though he's young, the way he's able to kind of impact this family it's really scary. And similarly, another book I loved that I just completely ignored everything else to finish it was A Flaw in the Design. By Nathan Oates, and it was similar in that just creating that sense of anxiety. And I guess maybe that sounds strange, but that's something I enjoy, and that you just are so immersed in this world that you're kind of gasping and just scared right along with their characters.
Those are fantastic. And hold on to some of those. Going to be coming back to book recs in just a few moments. In fact, I'm going to be asking both of you for book recommendations in a moment. But Liz, I can't wind down the interview before I ask you about the most exciting part of your writing resume, which is being an energy reporter.
Yes, exactly right.
So here's my question about that. So,
sure.
I mean, for many years before I became a fiction writer, I had to do a lot of nonfiction writing for my job. And it was like not super exciting stuff. But I always felt like it was actually great training to be a writer, because I had to write, clearly. I had to write accurately. And like the most important thing was that I had to write when I didn't feel like it. Like I just had to get my butt in the chair and produce 5,000 words, because like otherwise we weren't going to eat.
Exactly.
And I mean, did you feel like these experiences as a freelance writer, as an energy reporter, were like prepping you for doing the work you're doing now?
I think so too, definitely. Especially when I was an energy reporter, I was putting out about 4 pieces a day. And I often joke, if you're at a cocktail party and people say, what do you do? And you say, I'm a writer, they immediately think of, Stephen King or just, they definitely don't think about natural gas and crude oil markets. Like I can tell you that. And nor do they want to hear about that if you start, to talk about it. But I do think so, especially because not to bore you right now, but with natural gas, a lot is weather dependent. And so we had this funny editor. He was quite a curmudgeon, and I think he would tell you that himself. But he would always say, like, temperatures rise and fall. They don't warm up. That the weather can warm up, temperatures don't. So he really, in his own quirky way, he was really making you think about the words you were using. And then we would also say, prices plummeted, prices plunged. We were always trying to make it, it's hard to make natural gas that exciting, especially when you don't have any skin in the game. You're not, like a futures trader. So we would try to use like exciting verbs or, just about storage supplies, any way you could make it a little more creative. So it was almost like a challenge that I take with me today. I don't want to overuse words, or if there's a stronger verb, I want to try to use it. And So I think, but yes, definitely. And also, the clock is ticking. You've got to get that market report out. And so,
Right.
you're deadline driven, which I think is great training.
You're on deadline. You've got to find the time to do it. You've got to do it if you don't want to do it. And yeah, I know you're right. I mean, I would, for me, I was always falling into the passive voice, and so I had to write psych reports, and I was always sort of falling into the passive voice and stuff like that. And my for me, it was a supervisor would sort of say, like, it's, you have to say this in an active way. You can't be using the passive voice all the time. So yeah, it was, it's great. It's great training.
Yes.
That's fabulous. All right, we've come to the time of the show where we're going to, let me just make sure we don't have any more. Oh, no, one more audience question. I apologize. One more audience question, which is for Liz. Katie would like to know, what are you working on?
Oh, Katie, thank you for asking. Well, I'm actually in the revision process of a new thriller that focuses on two families that are longtime friends because their sons meet in preschool. And this is, again, where my own son will say, like, why do you keep writing about this? But so these two boys, they're in their 20s and they go skiing, and one of them goes missing. He doesn't come back. And the other one doesn't report it right away. And it causes this rift between their families as they begin to try to search for the missing man. So,
my God, you really know how to, like, especially for a parent, you really know how to, like, so now I'm not going to find out what happens, though, until this book comes out, I guess. But
hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll
know how to
find a home. Thank you for asking.
Oh my gosh, such a hook. All right. Now we're going to sell some books. So, Abigail, you're the professional here. I want to remind the audience, links for books that are recommended are going to be going into the chat. The audience with us now on online, thank you for being here. People who are with us in future time watching the video, use the links to buy the books from the Book House in Milburn, New Jersey, nowhere else. Abigail, what do you recommend people pick up?
Well, it's hard to choose a favorite book, but that's a given. So what I usually go with is the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner, which is a YA fantasy series. It has so many historical elements that I would almost call it a historical fiction, but it's very much also its own, fantasy world. And the first book of that is just called The Thief. And it you open on a grimy kid, a young teen sitting in prison because he bragged that he could steal anything and he got busted for it. And he gets a chance to get out, but only if he will help steal this mythical object. So he ends up kind of road tripping across this ancient Greek-inspired world, while the group of travelers are always telling myths to each other. So there's a lot of world building via storytelling, which I think is great. And it's very much a story where you start out with a bunch of characters who can't stand each other. So you get a lot of those interactions as they learn to live with each other and then maybe even to like each other. And it's just a very funny and smart book that ends up in the series where you would never imagine it's going. It just gets so expansive. It becomes sort of a courtly intrigue kind of series, which you wouldn't realize from this slow, classic road trip fantasy vibe that the first one has. And it does so much with just awesome narration and very subtle plot twists that you don't see coming, but they're entirely set up. It really makes Megan Whalen Turner my favorite author.
Oh, fantastic. I think it makes all of us want to read it. It's fantastic. Thank you. Great audience today, Robin. Thank you. I know you're joining late. Thank you so much for being here. Liz, you named a bunch of books earlier that were influential for you. But what would you recommend for people right now? Is there anything new right now or anything you're reading right now that sort of you're just excited about that you want to sell us?
Oh, well, she probably doesn't need my help at all, but I am listening to Tom Lake by Ann Patchett because I'm in a book club that we were supposed to be reading it. So I'm, as Abigail said, I'm reading with my ears because it's narrated by Meryl Streep. And I really feel almost like Meryl's doing like a one-woman show in my ears. It's fantastic. And so I should be doing other things like revising this draft, but I just want to keep listening because it's also made me think about just just the way she's reading these sentences, it's like now I just want her to read everything to me. It's
Right.
she's doing an amazing job. And so, like I said, and I also love when we started talking earlier about author events and people not showing up. I don't know if anyone has read it, but if we can link, I'd love to. Ann Patchett has a great piece about her early career being on the road and doing author events. And I guess she used to write for Bride magazine, and she would end up talking to the bookseller who was planning a wedding. And that would, so she would always feel like, okay, at least there was one person I connected with. But I thought to think about like her trajectory from having no one show up to having Meryl Streep read your book. Like, what an aspiration, right?
It's pretty great. We had Ann Patchett on the show during the first year. She came on to support Parnassus Books, and that was fantastic. And I know Tom Lake's getting quite a bit of buzz. So that's fantastic. Love it. Abigail, last question of the show always goes to you. Goes to the booksellers. It's going to go to you. It's a fill in the blank. The audience who's seen the show before knows it. Success as an independent bookseller is part luck, part hard work, and part what else?
I would say learning to be a book people person, even if you're not a people person. I've always been someone who is more comfortable in small spaces with not a lot of people, with not strangers, on paper and not out loud. That's not going to fly when you're the person running a book event. So I'm just learned to be a lot better at talking to strangers, because you know what? If someone's in a bookstore, they are probably my kind of person anyway.
Right.
So you're going to sell books, you got to talk to people. And I've been better at that.
That's fantastic. I love that answer. And I totally identify with it. I think I think authors have the same experience. I mean, we work sort of in a solitary way. I think most of us are kind of introverted, and then it's time to go out and do a reading or do an event or be on a panel, and it's like, oh my God, I've got to put on real clothes and stuff like that. So definitely identify. Thank you both so much. This has been just a delightful conversation. I'm so happy to speak with both of you. And to the audience, thank you. Thank you for being here, including internationally. Thank you for the questions and comments and enthusiasm. Just a reminder one more time that we are supporting the Book House in Milburn, New Jersey. Links in the chat to get all of, thank you for coming. Get all of Liz's books, including The Perfect Neighborhood, her most recent thriller, from the Book House online. Support wonderful literature, support independent bookselling, and come back. We're going to be off next week. We're going to be back week after for episode 150. We hope to see you there. And until then, be well, keep reading. Liz and Abigail, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I just want to say, if anyone orders from the Book House, I'm happy to stop in and personalize it. And I'll include my homemade bookmarks, which I don't know if Abigail has seen them, but that's just another way I procrastinate when I should be writing. But
oh, it's fantastic. Oh,
I'm hoping to hit that comedy night. So I'll be there in a few weeks.
We've buried the lead. All right, everybody get over to the link to pick up those books and to get the bookmarks. It's fantastic. All right, thank you so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.